In this lesson, we will demonstrate using the V-Ray distance texture while rendering on GPU, and the creative possibilities this gives us. For a quick overview, V-Ray's distance text creates a gradient over the surface of an object, mapped by the position of another object. This allows you to set a different color based on a point's distance to an object or object specified in a selection list. Okay, let's start by opening up the V-Ray settings and make sure we're on V-Ray GPU next. Then, let's start the IPR and take a look at the scene here. I'd like to create more of a story for this image by adding a little bit of spilled coffee to it. Let's see how we can do that with the help of the V-Ray distance text. If we open the material editor, you'll see that we already have a material set for our paper, but it is just a mid-gray color. To get things going, first we need to create a V-Ray distance text by right-clicking in the material editor view and selecting Maps, V-Ray, V-Ray distance text. Let's plug it into the diffuse slot for the paper's material. At first, there isn't much of a change. This is because we don't have an object selected to interact with the distance text yet. Let's go to the V-Ray distance text objects, click Add, and select the mug. Immediately, you'll see that we get a black to white gradient starting from the mug. The near color represents points that are right at the edges of the mug, while the far color is for points that are at a distance greater than the distance parameter radius from the mug. Alright, since we're going to use the distance text as a masker on the mug, let's swap the black and white values of the far color and near color by dragging the far color into the near color swatch and selecting Swap. Now, you'll see that the gradient starts with white and transitions to black as it gets further away from the mug. Then, we can control the size of the radius using the distance parameter. Lower values will show less of the near color, and higher values will show more of the near color. Okay, now to create the shape of coffee stains, we will need to break the shape of the distance text. The easiest way to do this is to simply map the distance parameter. I have prepared a noise texture that suits this scenario quite nicely. Let's take it and plug it into the distance texture slot as an instance, and you'll see that we immediately get a much more organic shape around the mug in our scene. However, we still need some way to control the transition from black to white. One method is to use a gradient ramp, so I've prepared a custom gradient for this purpose. The important thing to note here is that the gradient type should be set to mapped. Then, we should connect the V-Ray distance text as an instance into the source map slot of the gradient ramp texture. Now, if we plug the gradient ramp texture into the diffuse slot of the paper material, we'll see that we have control over the gradient transition of the near to far color parameters of the V-Ray distance text. Okay, that looks good so far. Next, to achieve the final result for this image, let's take a look at the composite map that I have set up here in advance. On layer 1, we have the base texture for the paper, and on layer 2, you'll see there is a brownish color with a slight amount of noise to create a subtle variation in its color. And its blending mode is set to multiply. Layer 2 also has a mask, which is the gradient ramp texture that we mapped a moment ago with the V-Ray distance text, so that layer 2's color only appears where the gradient ramp indicates it should. Together, these layers will help to give the paper both a base texture and coffee stain, thanks to the gradient ramp mask with the distance text. Now, the black far color of the distance text is filled with layer 1. Meanwhile, the white near color is filled in by the brown coffee stain color in layer 2, and the transition between these layers is controlled by the gradient ramp. Okay, now let's plug in the composite texture into the diffuse slot of our paper material and observe how this changes the material. Now, you'll see that we're getting a nice looking coffee stain and more details on the paper itself, thanks to the layers in the composite texture. Another useful aspect of the V-Ray distance text is that even though we have mapped the distance, we can still easily control the spread of layer 2's texture stain by tweaking the distance parameter. Let's try a few values once more, going from low to high. Just as we saw earlier, the low values will give us a subtle effect, while higher values spread the coffee stain all over the entire piece of paper. Feel free to test a few values on your own until you find a look that you're happy with. I think I'm going to stick with a value of 10. Another great thing about the distance text is that it is fully procedural, based on the objects you've added to its objects dropdown. This means that if we move any objects that we added to the list, in this case the coffee mug, the texture stain updates immediately based on the new location of the mug. Moving the mug around, you'll see that the stain follows the cup wherever it goes, giving us a ton of flexibility for positioning the coffee mug and tweaking the stain to our liking. Okay, now you've seen how in V-Ray Next, the V-Ray Distance Tex can be used with the speed of GPU rendering to get you fully procedural and object proximity-based texture masks for creating effects like coffee stains.